Good afternoon, everyone. We at BMSIT IEEE Student Branch hope you're all doing well and are safe at home. Welcome to yet another interesting webinar. Today, our speaker, Mr. Tushar Pandey, will be handling and talking about web APIs and JSON parsing. Before he starts, let me just give you a quick introduction about Mr. Tushar Pandey. He is one of us. He is a student at BMSIT. He is in his fourth semester studying computer science engineering. He has immense knowledge in Python, Node.js, Linux systems, and computer vision. He has done many projects with respect to these topics, and he's also currently working as a backend intern at IBM Global Remote Mentoring Program. And he has also worked as a backend intern at UrbanStop, where he specially worked with REST API development, testing, deployment of various RESTful API services across the client system. Today he'll be handling web APIs and JSON parsing. He'll be telling you about what web APIs are and how you are supposed to send requests, fetch the data, and sort it out however you want to, display it to your clients. So I will, without much further talk, I'll just hand over the session to Mr. Tushar Pandey. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Srinidhi. That was awesome. Okay, so let's start. So the agenda, intro Srinidhi has already given you. First, we'll look at what an API is actually. We'll look at some web API examples that are publicly available. They are free to use. You can use it any way you want. Then we'll delve further. We'll see what are HTTP requests, how do you send them, how do you manipulate them, etc. We'll talk about JSON a bit because all the things we'll be doing here will be in JSON. We'll code an API client so that we can pass a request and get the JSON from the server. We'll talk about authentication, like how some services do not let you to use their APIs freely. They need you to register for them, have a key, things like that. Okay, we'll see what have people built so far and what can you build using the web APIs. So yeah, and by the way, I hope my screen is visible, and all the links that are potential links that you can visit during this talk I have mentioned in the comment box. You can go through them. By the way, I will be providing QR codes for everything. So let's start. Intro has already been done. If you want my LinkedIn, you can scan the QR code. It's there. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's _Tushar Pandey 13. Everywhere it is Tushar Pandey 13. So APIs. API is short for Application Programming Interface. Take it this basic way. It allows one app to talk to the other app. It's the basic interface so that two apps can talk. That's the easiest definition you can get. Yeah, it makes things very easier for the developer because it is generalized. It is standardized. It is the same across all the platforms. So let's go deep. What is an API? How does it function? Take any example of technology that you use today. Like suppose your PC, your phone, suppose you have a smartwatch, that thing, your Raspberry Pi, anything. So at any given time when it is running, it has a number of independent systems on it that are running together. These systems, they provide some functionality, some services to other systems. And these services, they have to be provided by exposing some interface. When developers use that interface in their code, it's called using an API. Simple as that. So whenever a system exposes an interface, it's called an API. They're basically used for three things: data access, abstraction, and security. Data access means like suppose you are using an API for Mongo. Mongo is a database API. If you don't know, database service actually. It exposes its web API, so you can use it. You want to store some data. You send the data via the API to Mongo. It gets stored. You want to edit it. You send the request. It gets edited. You want to delete it. The bits get deleted. So it facilitates data access to the end client. Abstraction. Uh, Abstraction actually means that it's hiding a lot of complexity underneath it that it doesn't want the end users to know. Like, it will be very complex for the end user if they were to perform all those tasks that the API is performing for them already. It's in place for that. So take example of Uber, the Uber app on your phone. Uh, it shows a map when you choose a destination. So do you think that Uber gets the map from satellite and or other government resources and plots it and takes care of all the places and other things? No. Uber actually uses the Google Maps API to get that. Google does all the hard work, makes a map object and gives it to Uber Uber can use it easily. Uber doesn't have to worry about how the map thing is going to work. Uh, it just has to render the map, that's all. And so we can see that the responsibility of dealing with that map, it has shifted from Uber to Google now. Uber doesn't have to do those things. Google now will do this, do those things for Uber. So that's abstraction. And for the security, like the API that is in question, it can decide like how secure it wants to be, what kind of data it needs to send, what kind of data it will send based on some filters on its users, filters on authentication, filters on whether the API is in running state, overloaded state, things like that. And also for avoiding exploitation, like Google won't give you its map API free of cost. Like, you will have to register with a credit card. You'll get a key. After you use that key for auth, then you will get the access to that API. So API actually takes care of the security part of the service that it's trying to provide. Yeah. So that, yeah, exploitation can be stopped. Okay, web APIs. So APIs can be of different types. There are system APIs in all the operating systems that you might have heard, like today, Android, Linux, Windows, Mac OS, iOS. Each of these have a system level API for doing everything. Like, suppose your app wants to know the location in Android, it will interface with the location API in Android. It will talk with it. It will ask for permission. When the user grants the permission, it can use the location of the user. Similarly, we have web APIs. The difference is that here we are using the HTTP protocol to talk to the API via the internet. That's the only difference. Even if you use HTTP, if you were to use HTTP in the Android system itself, things would not be distinguishable. It would be all be the same almost. So let us see at some examples, like what can you use? What are some APIs that you can use freely? Spotify. See, Spotify maintains a very large record of music metadata. Not only music, but music metadata. You can query for the artist, the track number, the album, the genre, everything you can query for. And based on its web API, your app can get the data from Spotify in JSON format. So it makes it very easy for, if you are developing a music app, you can look it on Spotify. Let's go ahead. Twitter. Twitter is actually a very nice thing to have if you are concerned with dealing with textual data, like conversation between people. And yeah, it's like a warehouse of text. Like in live, millions of tweets are being done, and it exposes its API. It's a very good API. Like Twitter actually allows you to build good bots. There are numerous bots on Twitter. You can find a bot for almost anything. And using this API, you can do almost anything on Twitter that a normal user can do, and what a normal user cannot even do. Like this is just an example: search account activity of a user. You can filter tweets by hashtags or something like that. You can DM people. You can get stats on trends, something like that. There are many options available. I will open the Twitter page for dealing with the keys during this session. I'll show you how much it provides. Marvel. I wanted to mention this because you know we all watch Marvel movies. It exposes its APIs so that users can get the metadata on comics. Marvel has published a lot number of comics throughout this time, and if you open its website, it can show it. It has actually a section where you can try out its API. Like you can send a comic ID, it will give you its metadata, like what was the year when it was written, what's the story, who are the actors, blah blah. Open weather map, OWM for short. This is a very common API actually. You'll find it used in many places, like many weather apps use it, many news apps use it. Uh, and it's not I mean it's not a very simple API, I should call it. It's quite large. As you can see, this is only 6 functions that I'm showing. This API can do much more. You can get the current weather data, hourly forecasts. We have something like one call API. It makes things easier for users. You can get 16-day forecast, things like that. Okay, so main thing, it is providing you a lot of data to just one single call. Maps. Maps is actually a very interesting topic with APIs because maps are very hard to do. That is because there are systems. It is because of that there are systems dedicated to providing you data related to maps. We have OpenStreetMap, which is the open source alternative to Google Maps, and OSM is awesome, completely awesome, because Google Maps, you can't use it unless you have a credit card, unless you want to invest. Like for free projects, go for OSM 100%. But if you have a client that suppose wants you to get a route between two places, get distance between two places, get the information about any place, like they can query, get photos of places, get 3D images. I mean, there is Google satellite data available. So for that, you can use the Google Maps API. There is actually a whole platform dedicated to Google Maps, and it's very robust. You can use it. Okay, Netlify. Actually, a friend of mine had this question recently. He asked that what should he use. He was stuck at using AWS, and it's very, tiresome. And so Netlify is a service that allows you to like just push your local website on the internet very easily. Like you just have to push it to GitHub. You connect your GitHub account with Netlify, and it will host your website on Netlify. And you can just do it. You can do it with on your console, or you can just click a button. It will happen as easy as that. And how does this happen? APIs. Netlify has a REST API that you can bind with the project and provide its keys. And you just do a GitHub git push, and it will deploy to Netlify. It's very simple. Yeah. And by the way, it's called Lambda deployments because actually it's taking your code, your server code, and running it inside a function. I'll come to it later. Okay, this is actually very interesting. Okay. There are cloud services, Azure. So Azure like Azure, there is GCP also, there is AWS. They provide a whole host of services. Like there's no stopping to it, and they all have APIs. And a bunch of APIs. You can do like almost everything if you have an Azure account. Like it has hosting, it has ML, it has like analytics, it has throttling, everything. Kubernetes is almost universally available now. Almost every service is offering Kubernetes. Scaling is now universally available through APIs. All this is done through APIs. Like you don't even have to go to their site and click a button. You just integrate with your app. When your app starts, you have used the API, it will talk to the Azure service, do its thing. It's done. You don't have to blink an eye. Okay, other examples. Login options. Like whenever you use an app on your phone, it asks for, should I log in with Google, should I log in with Facebook? Those components are actually accessing the Google Auth API, or in some cases Zero Auth. That's also a service, nice service. Yeah, so that's the use of an API. Payment gateways, PayPal, Paytm. Like PayPal is almost universally supported right now, and it's very simple to use PayPal. Like anyone can use a PayPal account if you are a developer, and if you add your credit card, if you add your bank account like that, you can transfer money almost instantly. There is no overhead, nothing like that. And even if there is, it's like a minimum, like it's not that. And the configuration is so easy. You just have to apply your keys, that's it. That's the beauty of APIs. Like it's very simple to do stuff. You don't have to take the overhead of thinking about how that thing will happen. You want your app to have digital transactions, just add a payment API, done, that's it. uh, Buffer. So if you have heard of it, Buffer is a tool that social media influencers or other organizations for that matter, they use it to push content on a lot of sites simultaneously. Like you can use Buffer to push to Twitter, Facebook. There is a Slack for it, and earlier there used to be Google Plus. Like almost everything that exists in the social world, Buffer has a service for it. Okay, and it exposes its service using its API. If you are a developer, you're looking for automated, I mean, automatic tweeting system or something like that. Like whenever you push an update to your site, it should get tweeted, and you don't want to deal with the Twitter API itself, or or if the Facebook API if there is. So you can use Buffer, its API. It is very easy. Uh, Firebase, AWS, Mongo. These are cloud services actually, and they expose their services via the API. As simple as that. Like if you want to store some, uh, if you want to have a database that's you know on the internet, universally accessible, you can use the Mongo. You can use Mongo for that. They have, I mean, Atlas.com. I think Atlas is the name of the service they provide, and they host Mongo clusters actually. You can store your data on there. AWS is also there. I mean, it is widely known for its database services. Other services are also actually, and Firebase, as we all know. So these all basically integrate with your app using their APIs. Next, Telegram. If you have used Telegram, you must know that there are a lot of bots on Telegram. So how do these bots operate? Well, these bots are running in their own servers across the globe, with their code having the Telegram API integrated with it. So Telegram has an awesome site, and it exposes its API very beautifully. Like there is a even a, I mean, there is a separate bot called the Bot Father. Yeah, so it helps you create new bots, and yeah, it gives a tutorial for its APIs. Telegram is good. You can make bots with it. It's very easy. Next we come to NER. So named entity recognition. This is actually a very new term, and I'm kind of generalizing this term because this actually comes under a set of services that is already being provided by Azure. uh, Firebase provides it, and it comes under if you look it up, cognitive services, like suppose you have a text, suppose you got a text from a tweet, and the user tweeted about a restaurant. You want to extract the data that is contained in that tweet. Like, suppose if the user tweeted about a restaurant, what is the name of that restaurant, where is it located, stuff like that. So this is actually a topic that you learn in natural language processing. Uh, but since it's so widely used, services are available that you can use, and it's being exposed. Uh, so basically, you give it text of some noun, like proper nouns, like name of a place or someone's name, a thing. And what this service does is it actually looks up in a database uh, for matches for that string. It has a They have a huge database for these things. And suppose you enter Mount Everest, that is your string that you extracted. That is the two words that you extracted from a bunch of strings. And if you give it to an NER API, it will return to you. Maybe it will return to you the Wikipedia link to Mount Everest. Maybe it return to you the height of Mount Everest, some general information about the Mount Everest, things like that. If you give it, suppose, the name of a restaurant, just take that example. So maybe it will give you the address of the restaurant, maybe the phone number, maybe who is the owner, when is the timing, things like that. So this becomes actually important when you are NER actually becomes important when you are building parsers for stuff, because as we all know, like as you all should know, like your resumes that you send out to companies nowadays, they don't get verified by actual humans. There are machine learning algorithms in place, not even machine learning algorithms, they just extract the text, if to apply some OCR, if it's handwritten text, look for certain phrases, apply NER on them, and grade your resume a score based on those information provided by you. So actually, yeah, in this application, NER is very useful. Like if you provide, say, your school name or your college name, or whether a site mm, where you did a course on something, so it can look it up. It can provide the employer valuable information about those things. It can, and those things can help in grading your resume. That will improve its score. And further, there is the many more example I will show you as we go through. Okay, so let's continue. Using an API. We'll actually use an API in this one. It's a web API, freely available, very easy to use, nothing too complicated, and the response is also very simple. So it will be, I mean, it will be good for all users, whether you are a beginner or a pro. So the name of the site is exchange-rate-api.io. The link is in the comments box if you want to open it, or the QR code is here, you can scan it. And what it does is it's basically an API for foreign exchange values. Uh, it's synced with the European Central Bank, so the base will be euros, and it will return the relative yeah, exchange rates of all the currencies. Suppose this was actually, I mean, an application of mine when I was doing an internship. So I had to I had to convert currencies. PayPal uses this. If you have done a overseas transaction on PayPal, it will use exchange rate API, and it's not like the API that PayPal uses. It's almost the same that you are going to use right now. These are both synced 24 hours. Like every 24 hours the data updates. PayPal is the same. So you can get an insight on how PayPal works in converting currencies. Like suppose you want to, if you make a purchase for an item that was not originally sold in India, you have to pay in USD. But so when you convert that USD price to INR, it uses this API. It doesn't have its own database of like exchange rates. It doesn't have to manage with all that fuss. So what we will do is uh, this site has an API URL. I'll open this site in a short while. I will show you the API URL. We will send a GET request. So what this GET request will do, its basic API will provide us with relative exchange rates of all major countries respect to the euro. So that will be the response that we get from the server. And the response is almost always in JSON. This will return in JSON. I can be sure. We'll pass the JSON and then we'll see what we can do with it. So yeah, you should open postwoman.io if you have a computer right now, and I'll open it. Don't worry. Okay, so this is the site for foreign exchange API. And if you scroll down, you can see here some stuff is given. Like this is the actual, I mean, what they are suggesting you do. You send a GET request to this URL on with using this protocol. HTTP 1.1 is the protocol that we are going to use. That is standard. That HTTP is the standard. 1.1 is the current standard. 2.0 is, I think it's almost out right now, but we'll be using this 1.1, no problem. So this is the thing. This is the URL that we are concerned with right now. We are going to get the latest exchange rates. There are many more APIs in this site, but we're going to use this one only. So just copy this and we'll go to postwoman.io. So you might have heard of Postman. It's actually an Indian startup. So Postman is an application. So I have it on my PC. I can run it, but Postman is it's an offline software. You have to download it. You have to install it. It's generally slow. And Postwoman is a very nice alternative. It runs in your browser. It's very simple to use, very friendly. So all you have to do is just copy this URL, go to Postwoman, and we have this request field here. This thing. Paste the URL in this URL box. Now we have some things here. The method, like we'll use get here for the sake of convenience because it tells us to use get. Otherwise, it won't work. I'll tell you what this get means and what this other stuff means also. And just send it. Nothing more simple as that. And you can see that it's finished. It shows finished. And we got a response you can scroll down, it's in the response field. And the status is 200. 200 means that whatever you sent was processed successfully and it returned with a success status. 200 means success. And if you see here, these are the relative currency rates respect to the euro. If you have done JavaScript, you should know that this is an object. This is the syntax for an object. Basically, this is actually a JSON string that it has returned us. So what we will be doing is we will be using this API in code programmatically, so that suppose we want to calculate the rate of INR versus USD, like how much rupees per dollar. So we'll use this API, we'll calculate the relative rate of INR, we'll calculate the relative rate of USD, we'll divide them, we'll get the rate, all in code. We don't have to use Postwoman. So what you need to do is, yeah. What you need to do is go to this, QR code. The link is in the comment section. It's basically a collab file The Python, I've stored the Python code there. You don't have to run anything. The outputs are also stored. I'll just show you how it works. You can scan the QR code, or you can go to the comment box to get the URL. I'll navigate to that site right now. So here we have. So we'll be making an API client, and a client is a thing. A client gets data from an API. The API will send it in JSON format. The client will parse it, and we will print the contents. Okay, so this is Python. I should tell you this is Python. Beforehand, we are not using JavaScript. I've actually wanted to use JavaScript, but thought that it would be quite difficult for new beginners. Actually, Python is actually very simple in this aspect. In the aspect of making a client, client is very easy to make it Python. So imports. Two things we have to import: request and JSON. These are two libraries. These are built-in libraries. You don't have to install anything with it. You just install the default Python redistributable package, and these two libraries get installed with it. Request and JSON. So yeah, we can now make request and pass JSON. Variable declarations, just one, the URL. The same URL that we copied from here. It's the same URL that we're going to use here. That's it. Now we'll send the request. So we'll use the request.get. So request is the import that we're using, and get is a function in that. So it sends a get request to the server. The server will send back a response that we store in the response object below. All we have to do is make a field called response. Response equals requests dot get your URL. You are basically fetching this URL from the server. It's sending a get request. The contents of the response will be stored in this object called response. We'll print response. We'll print response.content. We'll print the type of response.content to see what type it is. So when you execute this thing, it will spit out this response 200. As I told you, 200 is the status code for success. That's evident here. Response.content. This is a string. This is actually the exact same JSON string that we saw here. Same thing, no difference. And type of response.content. Class bytes. So what this means is the JSON is encoded in bytes. So this means that you can send images over JSON. You can encode those images in base64 and send them over JSON. You can send actually binary data over JSON also. What this means is, so now we have the JSON stored in our memory in this variable called response. We can pass the JSON. JSON.loads is the variable. It's a function that can pass. The loads is the short for load string, and it can pass JSON strings, and it returns. It actually returns you a Python dictionary. We'll see. You just need to make a variable called data. Data equals JSON.loads. This thing response.content. That's a string. When you print this data, print this variable called data. This is actually a Python dictionary. We have the base key here. We have the date key here. We have the rates key here. The rates key has the value, which is also a dictionary, which has all these keys associated with this respective value that are the currency rates. The type of data if you run it will output dict. That confirms that we have a Python dict. So that if we get a Python dict, that's the final straw. We can do anything with what you want with it. You can change the data. It will change it in memory. It will not change it the server if you want to change it, but you can use it any way you want. Now, extraction of data. Suppose you want to extract the rate of INR versus rate of USD. What will you do? So we have the data in the Python dictionary. All you have to do is actually access the respective values. Like INR is located here. So you can access INR by using the either the dict.get function in Python, or you can use indexing. So I'm using the easier method. I've just used indexing data, index rates, index INR. That will spit it out 85.352. This is respective euros. So 1 euro equals 85 rupees almost. Suppose you want to calculate how much INR is in 1 USD, you divide the relative rate of INR by relative rate by USD. Simple as that. It's in your memory. It doesn't have to fetch anymore. It's stored in your memory. So looking at this code again, only 6 lines. That's all, and 6 line with extra variables. If you want, you can do this in only 3 lines. That's it. You don't have to write all these things. But for the sake of simplicity, I've done this in 6 lines. So yeah, that's how easy it is to make an API call. This is the basic thing that all the services that I told you before will use. On top of this, some will contain, some will need you to send them keys, some will need you to send them arguments. You can do all of that using this function get, or for supposing post request, there's a function called post, stuff like that. It's not much different from this. This is the basic stuff that you can do, and everything else builds on top of this. This is the basic stuff. Okay, going back. Yeah, yeah, requests. So I told you that there are many kinds of, I mean, we were sending a get request here, right? There are actually there are many kinds of requests. Uh, there is get, there is post, there is put, there is delete, there are various other kinds. All you need to know is get and the post are the most used. What these requests do? Requests help you to get, add, update, or delete data on a server. You're making a request to the server to do these things. They are standard, and it's actually part of the HTTP 1.1 standard. It's universal. It's everywhere accepted. There is no change in whatever platform you're using. There is the syntax or the structure of the request will not change according to the platform. It's standard. So yeah, this is the schematic of it. Your client, this client here is represented by a PC. It can be an application. The server can also be an application. They can either run on the same machine. They can be running on different machines. They can be running on different networks. It is just an analogy. Uh, the client sends an HTTP request to the server using either a get method or a post method or some other method. The server accepts that request, processes it, and sends a response. The response can be success, can be failure, can be some other error, can be anything. But most of the time, the data that is sent as response to the client, it is encoded in JSON format. Okay, so yeah, this is how the request that we made in Postwoman here actually. We're using the method get. See, you can see here there is post also, delete here, put, head, all these things are there, and there is URL. So a request basically consists of these 3 things. Get, I mean that is the request type here. The URL of the URL of the this is a URL is actually important because this URL can change on depending whether it is a web API, in which case it is called a URL, whether it is suppose it is not a web API, it is a system API, like on the Android system. It might not be expressed in terms of a URL. URL is only an identifier for where the service is being stored. It might be expressed in terms of a URI, that is a uniform resource identifier. So it will not have the HTTP protocol then. But for web APIs, this is the standard URL. This is the type of URL you are going to get. It might have a port here also, but this is using the default port. And protocol is generally standardized to HTTP. I mean, you can send a request in almost any protocol that you want. Your applications actually do this. They use different kind of protocol, like your torrent application. If you have used torrent, they use UDP to send requests to UDP servers. Your game server, that if you have placed multiplayer, you have played multiplayer games, CS:GO server actually use UDP. Uh, Many of mobile game servers also use UDP uh, because there are differences in these protocols. UDP is supposed to be faster than HTTP, things like that. But what I want to say is a request can be made in any protocol. So we made a request, the server processed it, gave us some data. The data was in JSON. So what is this JSON? We've heard it quite a lot by now. We'll look into it. What is JSON? So JSON is short for JavaScript Object Notation. I'll tell you why JavaScript is used here. It is actually very interesting. Used for serialization. It is that is an easy way to move data. So what serialization basically means is, suppose you have a bunch of data, you want to send it from one place to another. You convert it into a string and you send it over the network. Yeah, so that's what serialization is. It's universally supported. Almost every system that you can think of that has been or in operation till now, any operating system, any other application, JSON, you can be assured that JSON will be supported there. It is so widespread. JSON is so widespread. There are JSON parsers for almost every language in existence. And the syntax is also very familiar. It's very easy to write JSON objects with your own hands. Like you don't have to use code for that to encode the data. It is easy for you, us humans, to read it, maybe modify it if you want. It is easy for machines. We'll get to this machines part later. So yeah, what is yeah? So why is this JavaScript actually or JavaScript used here? So JSON came into existence with the advent of JavaScript. Actually, it was used originally when JavaScript was released, I think in 1995 or something like that. So what JSON does is maps a JavaScript object directly to a string. So you can see here a JSON string that when you parse it, it becomes a JavaScript object. The similarity of these fields, it's quite visible. Like all the fields are same, nothing has changed. There are no, I mean, type conversions. Like this boolean value was boolean here, is boolean here. This object was supposed to contain another object. It has that thing. This was supposed to be a string. This is a string. No extra characters are added. In fact, characters are other than commas and some braces. That's all. I mean, it's a direct map, almost direct mapping to a JavaScript object. There are very few things in JavaScript that cannot be encoded to a JSON string. Uh, you can't encode a function to a JSON string, if I remember, like completely. You can't do it completely. You can do it partially, but not completely, and some other things. Otherwise, almost all of your JavaScript code can be exported to JSON. That's the basic thing, the basic reason why it's used so popularly, because since Node.js surfaced in 2008, the web as of this moment is now exclusively being run on JavaScript. PHP is almost dying right now. Everything runs on Node. Uh, the creator of Node has created actually Deno, which is successor of Node, and it also supports JavaScript. A superset of JavaScript has come up called TypeScript. It's very interesting. It's made by Microsoft. Microsoft, it has regular updates, things like that. And because of this, like the whole community is using it, the whole ecosystem is using JavaScript. That's why JSON is so popular, and that's why if you encounter any data on the web, it will primarily be JSON string. Okay. Also, JSON can be very fast, like even faster than normal text. Although it's written at although it's written as text, this is all text data only. But if when you make up when you parse JSON, there have been attempts at parsing JSON faster than reading simple text. So yeah, so a team made this parser called SIMD JSON that achieved a speed of 2.5 gigabytes per second, and that's very fast, very fast. That's faster than reading a text file. If you have the if you have an SSD of some speed like that, it's faster than reading a text file. So how does it happen? So actually, a few tricks that it uses. It's called SIMD. SIMD stands for single instruction multiple data. It actually makes your CPU work like your GPU. It makes it faster. That's all you need to know. It's very low level stuff. It's not meant for web developers to know. But I'm just giving an example here. If you want more details, you can go to this link. It's in the comment box also. So this also, I mean, contributes to the fact why JSON is so popular. It's very fast. I mean, it's very popular. That's why it's very popular. Okay. Authentication. Uh, this is actually a very important topic of using APIs because not all APIs are meant to be used publicly, meant for free use. Many of them have caps on how much can you use them, like how much data can you transfer, how many requests you make in one day, how many users, actual individual users can you have. Uh, they have filters on users, so they can blacklist you if they want. So yeah, not all services are freely available. Most require proof of identities, like you need your uh, email account and your password to log in into Gmail. Same way, these sites that offer these services via their APIs, they offer you credentials. If you register for them, sometimes it's free, maybe for a free plan, or if there is a pricing involved, when you register with them, they give you credentials called keys. So these keys act as proof of identity for those sites that yes, you are who you claim you are. You will use this data responsibly, and you have to use these keys to work with the API. Like when you are sending a request, you have to include uh, either these keys in whole or in encrypted form. And without these keys, you can't use them. The service will not be accessible by you. They'll just give a 404 that it's not found or something like that, or maybe access denied. That's all they will say. And these keys should also always be kept confidential. Like if suppose you are working for a client and the client has paid for a service, for a service that has an API, like suppose your client has a GCP subscription, okay, Google Cloud Platform. So GCP will actually give you some keys, and you have to use those keys, and it's meant for your use only, for your client's needs only. If you release those keys in the public, it might go in the hands of someone who might misuse them, and it will cost your client. Indirectly, it will cost you. It will cost your job. It will cost your reputation, things like that, and they can take you to court for that. And so, keys should also always be kept confidential. That is very important. Needless to say, that is very important. So, I'll show you how these keys work actually. I'll show it with Twitter. Twitter is actually a very nice API environment. Let me open Twitter. So yeah, we're here. We saw this screen in the starting part of the presentation. I told you that I'll come here later, and so we'll get started. Okay, we'll try to get some keys with Twitter. Like we'll try to do the first steps of creating a bot on Twitter, or suppose or making the API available for our use on Twitter. So which tools are available? This is the standard API we'll be using. There are other API, premium, enterprise. You have to pay for these. And okay, so yeah, apply. This is the button I was looking for actually. So we apply for developer account. Uh, Suppose yeah, we'll choose this hobbyist thing because yeah, because I just want to show you guys how it works. I'll just click on next. Okay. Which country do you live in? I live in Belarus. What do you like to call you, Tushar? Okay, next. So once you actually have the I'm not filled this because I'm not going to register for the app, but once you click next, you have to you have to review your what settings you have chosen and what terms they are offering. They will give you some keys. Okay, this is a long process. I mean, it usually takes some time to process, maybe a few hours, but in the end, they will give you some keys, and you can use those keys in your suppose you are making a bot or you are making an analytics tool that you scrapes data from Twitter. You can use those exact keys and use them on in your tool. Okay, so that's how you get keys. You just register for a product, they give you keys, you use your keys, you use those keys in your project, in your code. And don't ever, if you are planning to use keys, don't publish them on any public site like GitHub. GitHub is a public site. If your code is public, or even if uh, your employer has different teams on different things and you can access code of other teams, don't make those keys public. You should use environment variables for that. Yeah, you just don't publish them in publicly. You'll be in a lot of trouble then. Okay, so what have people built? APIs are very widespread now. Almost everything that you see today uses APIs in some kind. So what have people built? I'll show you some different projects what people have built. But the thing is, the list is very long. It's a very interesting list. I love to show it, but it's so long that this session will last for hours and hours and hours, and everyone will get tired. So I've actually provided a this guy actually no shake. This guy has provided us with a compiled list of public APIs that people have built or their services which are being offered by companies. The link is also in the comment box. You can scan this QR code to go to this GitHub site. I'll show you the site. This yeah. So this is it. What this contains is categorize different APIs scout from over the web, which make their resources available for consumption. So yeah, this is actually basically a listing of various APIs that you can use. So you don't have to suppose you are idea hunting, like what do you want to do with this API knowledge? What do you want to make? So you can just scroll here. I mean, there's a lot of things here, like everything, all from anything to everything you can find here. Like there's another rates API. There's Fixer.io. For data science, we have toolkits. For design, we have Dribble. Dribble also has an API, if you want to know. There are various dictionaries, there are entertainment, there are events, face recognition, file storage, everything. This is a very good list if you want to consult it, reference it. This is not me. If you use it, you should probably start it, but it's a very good project. Yeah. Uh, yeah, and One thing that I would like to show you, this is actually my favorite project that someone else has built. This is a Breaking Bad quotes API. So someone was bored out of his mind, I think, to make this thing, and it's genius. What more can I say? Someone built an API just to spit out Breaking Bad quotes. You can go to this site, click on randomize, and it will give you a quote. I don't know what you will make using this API, but it will be awesome if you use this. So yeah, and it's free. It's online. It's free. Anyone can use this, and genius. So what can you build? You can. I've shown you the list of what people have built. I've shown you various resources. I've shown you various example of services that are available using APIs. Using this stuff, I'm using this basic stuff. I mean, what can you build? Make a random code generator. So I just took this idea from that Breaking Bad thing. Just go make it one. That can be your base project for making an API. Go make an API for a random code generator. Maybe put it on Heroku or something like that. Publish it on your GitHub. It will be good. It will be nice. Something to do. Maybe you watch some TV show. Generally, usually, repeatedly. You can make course from that. Okay, serious stuff. NLP NLP is actually gaining traction with Twitter a lot of these days. Not these days. Uh, Ever since deep learning was generalized a few years back, 2015, 2016, NLP has gained traction very much, and Twitter makes it so easy for you to get data. Like all the data that is on Twitter, it's raw. Okay, it's unfiltered, uncensored. There are emojis, there are metaphors, there are links, there are images, all kinds of data. You can apply whatever you want on that data. Maybe you want to build your own NER thing, name entity recognition. So you can train on the Twitter data to find NER stuff like like proper nouns. What do they mean? Where do they link to? Where do they generally link to if they are a shortened URLs? Okay, maybe you can make a emotion detector using what like suppose if there's a heated debate on some presidential campaign. What is the general emotion of that debate? Lot of stuff is there. Images are also available on Twitter. You can probably make even a chatbot in using Twitter API. Like it will be a bot, but you use a Twitter API to get its and get the thing get it replies like what people are talking to the bot, and you can DM those people using the same API. Using maybe you built a NLP model for a chatbot, you can use that, and you can make a live chatbot on Twitter that you can show to everybody. uh, yeah, you can make a telegram bot that I told you before. So YouTube also has an API, a very nice API. Actually, YouTube has a nice API. And if you saw, there is a YouTube creator called Tom Scott. He made a recent video. And what's special about that video is the title of that video changes to sync with how many views that video has. Like, I was one of the first people to watch that video. So when I opened the video, the title was, "This video has 800 views." I was like, okay, maybe he has just written it randomly. But when I opened it the next day, it showed this video has 400,000 views. So yeah, you can do this. YouTube will not do it for you. There is no option that you can go and click in YouTube to do this thing for you, but you can do it using the YouTube API. You can use the YouTube API to edit metadata of your videos. So what Tom Scott did was very simple thing actually. He queried for how many views his video has. He just extracted the number from it, and applied the name of the video to that string and sent the data to YouTube API. And YouTube uploaded it and updated it, and it's still there. If you open it, the video is still there. Okay, you can connect your Raspberry Pi with Google Assistant or Alexa or any other cloud service. Like you can tell your Raspberry Pi to send SMS messages for when an event happens, or your Arduino for that matter. It's very easy. You have to there are APIs, there are sample services in place for that. Like Assistant has many of those services are available for Assistant for Alexa. There are many tutorials available for this also. If you are interested in, embedded things, this is very interesting for you. uh, Sentry. If you have ever like worked on a cloud project before, and you have deployed it, so logging is very important actually for any app you make. And once it has been deployed, if you don't have a proper log monitoring system, I'm telling you, the results will not be good. I have actually faced this problem before, and it was a nightmare for me. So Sentry is a service that provides log monitoring service to you. It will alert you in whatever way it can if there is any error or any warning, and you can use its API to integrate it with your console logger that you use in your app. Like if you maybe you have a server that all the maximum amount of logging that you do is limited to your console. Suppose you have this configuration, so you can integrate Sentry with that. The logs will get uploaded to the your Sentry account, and if there is an error, Sentry will notify you via whatever means that it can send you push notification, it can send you email, like stuff like that, and it can make a difference. It can make a very big difference. Like I had this problem. There was an error, and I had to open Firebase logs for that, and Firebase logs is very bad. They don't send you notifications for anything. So yeah, use Firebase services in your mobile apps or whatever warehouse you're using. Firebase can completely be used off of APIs. You don't have to install, like you don't you maybe you have to install a dependency for Firebase. That's all there is. And it's universally, like for every almost all platforms Firebase is available. You can use its services. There are other services like Firebase also. AWS is there, Azure is there, stuff like that. You can make your own API server. This is actually advanced stuff. For most of the people that are here, this will not be a priority, I know. But if you are interested, you can look it up. Uh, we did the coding, we did the programming for the client in Python. But if you are to make your own API server, uh, I recommend you to use JavaScript. Not because it's popular, because JavaScript makes more sense when you are thinking in server terms. In client terms, Python is fantastic. Like it's very easy, and there's not much overhead there. But if you want to make a API server, you can. There are libraries available for it. Express is a very good library for it. You can make it, and it will run on your machine if you want. It will run on another server if you host it. Like I told you about Netlify. It's here somewhere. Yeah. So if you happen to make a node server or something like that, you can host it on Netlify or something like that. Uh, it has Lambda deployments that will actually run your node code or any Python. If your server is written in Python, it will run your code, and it will respond to events just like a normal server would. But the overhead is very much reduced. And like it's very simple. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to limit this session to API clients only, because I thought that including API servers would make this very long, very long, and most people would get tired. So if you want more, you can, contact me. I will maybe talk with the guys so we can arrange for another session on servers or anything else for that matter. I'm available. Yeah, thanks. If you want details, these are the details. Yeah, you should actually this is my GitHub account. You can get all these details there if you don't want to visit now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tushar. Hope it was a great session for the audience. And yeah, I move on. Like now, it's question time. Any question you can ask Tushar.